right, so thank you so much again for being here. For folks who are just joining us, welcome. And for folks who are coming back or just joining us on Zoom, welcome to you as well in the virtual world. We're really glad that you're here as well. We're going to kick off our next panel on knowledge production, art, and media. And the spirit of this panel was to kind of, in between this bracket of resistance and activism and governance at the end of the day, bring in people who are really creating narratives around climate change and legitimizing Indigenous knowledge in both the art space, but also in the academic space, which is really challenging to do often, as many of the folks in this room know. So the people who we're bringing in are a combination of youth leaders, as well as people who have decades of experience. And they're going to be speaking a bit to their experience primarily in the space of academics, but I also want to acknowledge that all the panelists that we've brought in have significant experience in the Alaska region / the Arctic more broadly. And so we're going to be able to go pretty deep into that space in this panel, which is very exciting. And to moderate the panel, I'd like to introduce Liz Contreras. Liz is a graduate student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is completing her Master's of Education in the Human Development and Education program. She's also a part of FIERCE at Harvard. FIERCE stands for Future Indigenous Educators Resisting Colonial Education. And we're really glad that she can join us today to moderate this panel. So take it away, Liz. Thank you.
So hello, everyone. I'm glad to moderate panel 2, Knowledge Production, Art, and Media. And we're going to start off with an introduction of our panelists. So first we have here Charitie. If you could spend around 5 minutes telling us about you and your work, that'd be great.
Yeah, so waka wina ibigo yutunugubach jaminga Kongiganak, Alaska. First, I just want to thank Vic for organizing all of this. And I'm really honored to be in this space. But yeah, my name is Charitie Ropati. I am Yupik and Samoan, and my native name is Agubach. My family is originally from Kongiganak, Alaska. And I was born and raised in Enguage, Alaska. But I am a current undergraduate student at Columbia University, and I study civil engineering and anthropology. And a lot of the work I do is in permafrost degradation and really understanding the framework of research when we enter communities like my own. And one thing that I've found in my experience so far is that we have people, research teams, even though they might be well-intentioned, they come into our communities to get academic experience, or they come out of that just to get a certain degree. Whereas Native people who do this work, we do this for the survival, we do this for the visibility of our people. And I really want to create a framework where researchers understand that research that validates Indigenous knowledge systems is very much possible. And it's something that hasn't been done in the past, but it's something that a lot of people are starting to think about, especially with the co-production of knowledge. So that's kind of like, I guess, the surface level of the work I do. And I also work with the Center for Native American Youth on education, climate education, and making sure that the information and what we learn is accessible to Native youth and Native elders back home in our community. But yeah, again, I'm super honored to be in this space. And yeah, I guess that's like a really brief introduction of like what I do. I just came from one of my classes, environmental control and pollution. So they offer really great resources for students here who want to study how we approach climate change and how we think about it and how we think about the framework of research. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me time to talk about myself, and I'll pass it along back to you.
Thank you. So next up we have Alex. Is Alex?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you turn your camera on?
Hold on a sec. Okay, yeah. There we go. Sorry about that. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Alex Flaherty. I'm Inuk. I live in the capital of Iqaluit, Nunavut. I'm doing my conference call in this Zoom meeting in an igloo. So I'm here to talk. Yeah, you see how the nice little spiral shapes are and how we build an igloo. So these are some of the programs I run for kids in the north. It's all about connecting with cultural, gaining confidence in themselves. And there's a lot of science involved, I guess. There's a lot of traditional science, how we say it, a lot of Inuit Kayumayetohangit that people are losing. And this is the kind of programs that we run in the north in Iqaluit, is running youth programs that are sometimes 10, sometimes are a month long. We take them out on the land, teach them different skills. We also do a lot of research with the kids. We take them out, teach them how to do water quality work in the ocean. And yeah, this type of stuff we do, and we take them out skidooing, we take them out dog sledding, boating, fishing, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Next up. Oh, we had Darcy. Sorry, Darcy.
Gwenzi, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Darcy Peter. I'm Koyukon and Enguage and Athabaskan from Beaver, Alaska. Gwenzi, good morning. I'm a scientist at Woodwell Climate Research Center. Grew up doing, I think, a lot of the stuff that Alex is, trying to teach those kids: hunting, fishing, trapping, taking care of the land, sharing, a lot of the traditional values that I grew up with. I hope to pass on to my cousins and to other people. But as a scientist, a lot of my work, I think, focuses on making sure that scientists and Western researchers are doing ethical research. Like Charitie said, a bunch of people go to Alaska or go to the north, go to the Arctic in Canada or everywhere as part of their program, and they see it as this exotic place, and they take a bunch of our resources and kind of take off, and we never hear from them again. So I think a lot of my work would, I guess, be as an ethics police for Indigenous people, making sure that people at Woodwell and all scientists, are building that relationship. A lot of the programs that they run are going to keep going back to, places in the Arctic and in Alaska in particular with my job. So just making sure that they, are engaging with the tribe, making sure that their research is going to benefit somebody, because if they're going to keep going back and doing research, then it should be good research that's going to help somebody. So I guess that's also a very, broad surface level example of things that I do. So Masik Cho for having me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Enguage.
Hello, everyone. Sa kaningwami at sa kapunga, kalaliwanga, kalasnunaninganit. My name is Sokaningwak. In my native language, it means beloved son. I am an Inuk from Greenland, and my pronouns are they, them. So I am an Indigenous rights activist and artist. My work is mainly focused on Indigenous people's rights, decolonization, revitalization, and just colonialism in general. And that also includes my my art. So the things I've been working on for the past few years have mainly been Indigenous people's rights. Yeah, I guess that's me.
Thank you. To start off, the first question we have is, why is Indigenous leadership in knowledge production important for climate action. And before I start calling anyone, would anyone want to volunteer from our panelists? If not, I could go through the list that we have. I'll start us off. How about Charitie?
Yeah. Do you think you could repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Sure. So why is Indigenous leadership in knowledge production important for climate action?
Oh yeah, that's an amazing question. Sorry, it's been a long morning so far. I think a lot of the things that we're seeing in science, a lot of mind my language, but Western scientists are talking about are things a lot of our elders have predicted 70 years, 80 years before those findings came out. Like I remember my mother telling me about how our elders back home were describing how the ice was rotting. And when I come into a space like Columbia, it's very dehumanizing because why do we need Western academia to like ensure that the voices of our people are heard? And I strongly believe in that the knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems, but also like even the knowledge and stories that we hear and take note of from those in our community are just as important and what we learn in the classroom. And I know for me, it's more important. And again, people need to understand that like the state of what we're facing as a whole, all of this could have been prevented if people listened to us sooner. And I know this may be hard to hear for some people, but I feel like so much of what I've learned here in civil engineering are things I've learned from my own grandmother. And it's crazy because, you know, it's just like that parallel, if that makes sense. And so I think that's why the co-production of knowledge, but especially understanding that what we learn from the original caretakers of the land, it's so important and it's necessary, especially now, if we want to mitigate the risk of climate change. I don't know, sorry, that's like a lengthy answer. Some of the things I said were kind of weird.
That's what we need, that's why.
Yeah, but like academia. Yeah, sorry. Like academia especially, I think even Native people who attend Harvard even can be so violent to Indigenous peoples. And so much of what I've learned are things I've learned back home of how to subsist from the land, how to cut fish, smoke salmon, ways to take care of the land, because we don't view the land as a commodity. It's like a being. It's part of who we are. It's something that we respect. It's not something we sell. It's not something that is a business. And that's something that Western science needs to regard. That's how they need to view land. How research, that's how they need to regard land. Yeah, I really like that question. But yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Darcy?
Yeah, thank you. Must see Charitie for all your comments, because I agree wholeheartedly. This is a really loaded question, right? Like, why should Indigenous people be involved in science, basically, or in academia, or why should we fill these spaces? It's because we haven't had the opportunity to, you know, like looking at the history of, you know, not only Alaska, but of this country, like every time I see an Indigenous person, you know, we have this baseline understanding of each other, and we do the nod, right? Like the, hey, you know, like I know you, you know me, because we're not supposed to be here. Like Christopher Columbus tried to commit genocide and he failed, and we're here and we're not supposed to be here. So as a response to that, they created a system in which we can't fill these spaces, and it's not meant for Indigenous people. And I think a lot of the systems that exist, all these colonial systems, academia, research, things like that, it's basically to just prove that Western scientists know as much as Indigenous people, and whether they know that or not, that's like the baseline of it. Because I agree completely. My uncles, my grandma, my mom, even, like, everyone tells me things and I know it as truth, right? Like my uncle told me when I was 8 years old, like, the river is getting wide and shallower, like a lot of things are changing. And I thought he was crazy at the time because I was 8 years old. And then I grew up and I went to college and they were like, oh yeah, erosion and thermo erosion. And they were just explaining what my uncle said in different terms. So I think a lot of these systems that exist aren't made for us, but we're kind of forced to occupy them and raise our voices because they need to be heard. What's one really good reason to include Indigenous people in these systems and in science is because what's good for Alaska and what's good for, Greenland, and what's good for Canada, what's good for the Arctic is good for the world. Like, we're just feeling the impacts of climate change at 3 times the rate. What's happening in the Arctic is going to happen in New York City, in London, in Tokyo, and all these big places. And I've had the opportunity to go to COP 25 and 26 in Spain and in Scotland this past November. And it's so frustrating hearing, all these conversations, like when it raises 3 degrees C, when this happens, but it's raised in the Arctic and in the island nations. Like, we're already feeling the impacts of climate change. Like, it's not like we're there advocating for ourselves because of these atrocities. We're there advocating for ourselves, yes, for the atrocities, but also because what's good for the Arctic and the island nations is good for the world. We have all the answers to climate change, but we have the answers, but we're not in the system. Like, our voices aren't equivalent to others in the system. So now we're fighting to have a voice because we have like all these decades and generations of knowledge, and we have all the answers from our elders and from the stories and from living on the land and being in touch with the land in a way that, Western scientists aren't. And our voices are the ones that are often not heard. So I think that, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, Charitie. And I'm sorry that, you're occupying the place you are and, have the feelings you do. I was also an undergrad student at one point in time in Colorado, and I know how isolating it is. I've also lived on the East Coast, and I know how that feels. I lived in Cape Cod for a couple months, and man, like, to go into a grocery store and not see anybody who looks like you, or to go to a medical appointment and have people whisper, like, whisper behind your back, and to have people ask you straight up, what are you, those are microaggressions, because the world that we live in itself is not meant for, brown people, for people of color, and for Indigenous people, as a whole. So, just want to say that I'm really honored to share, the stage and this platform with Alex and, with Segenguak. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name right, and Charitie. Please correct me in saying your name, but yeah, hopefully, we're all friends after this panel, and, I just want to say thank you for your guys' perspective and, for being here. I think this is awesome. Masi.
Thank you. Second Enguage.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, it's super important that Indigenous peoples are leading when it comes to climate change, and that they have a voice when it comes to climate change, especially for us in Greenland, because Greenland is a huge, has a huge spotlight when it comes to climate change, regarding our ice. But what's important for me is that, 80% of Greenland are Inuk. There are Inuit, meaning Indigenous peoples. Yet the white people are in the frontier, and when it comes to climate change, the scientists are in the frontier. And I saw a documentary. I saw 2 documentaries actually at the film festival, where it was about science, and like science in Greenland. And one was from the scientists and the other was from an Indigenous perspective. And what's crazy is that, you know, like I said, 80% of us in Greenland are Indigenous, but the scientists refuse to listen to us, even though that we keep saying, like, this is hurting this and this and this. For example, in North Greenland, the hunters where, ice is melting and stuff like that, their hunting is hurting. They can't get any money because the ice melted a month before than it was supposed to this year, so that they can't hunt what they're supposed to, so they can't get any money. So it's not only hurting the environment, but it's also hurting our traditions. So yeah, that's mainly why it's so important for me, just making it short.
Yeah, if I can chime in here too. Yeah, it's insane. I'm from a small village of about 25 people along the Yukon River here in Alaska. And, I remember being a kid and every spring we'd go to Beaver and build a fish wheel and we'd get the fish net ready. And, we only get kings and silver salmons up in Beaver because it's so far up the river. We don't get all the different kinds of salmon there. We don't get, pinks or, we only get 2 different types of salmon, kings and silvers. And I remember going to check the fish wheel twice a day with my uncles, and we get like 10, 15 king salmon every time we would check it. And it's a huge part of our culture and our value system, to cut fish together, to, share the first catch with our elders. So much of our values are tied in with, food and with the land. And, I remember being in college and my uncle called me and I was like, hey, like, how's the salmon doing? And he was like, oh, we got 17 total last summer and we haven't been able to fish there for years. So now it's like, even in my generation, I'm watching my culture die in front of my eyes. And man, it's exhausting. We don't have the privilege of turning our laptop off and then going and living our lives after 5 p.m. Like, this is very inherent to us as Indigenous people, because a lot of our culture is tied in with it, and climate change is impacting our culture, our way of life, our sustainability, our food, our water, our security. And so it's really daunting, to go to COP and fill those spaces and, to have them I heard so many talks about the Greenland ice sheet and they were all white scientists. I didn't hear one Indigenous person from Greenland present. And I just shook my head in the audience. I was like, oh my God, like, here we go again. Nothing's changed again. Like, it's really disgusting because Indigenous people have been watching it happen since time immemorial, since, before time existed. And we're the ones whose voices are often put down. So yeah, I just want to say, I'm glad that everybody's here who is here. And yeah, sorry I'm taking up so much time, but you guys are making really, really good points. Masi.
No, thank you for sharing. Alex, do you want to chime in as well?
There we go. We're off mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, for somebody that has been doing research for a total of over 12 years, right? When I just first started doing research, securing contracts, all that kind of stuff, I used to work for the government of Nunavut. So I started my research career related to environmental impacts, climate change for a while. Now that I'd say maybe 60% of my total income for polar outfitting is research. I just want to say that there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of people that are willing to fund these different types of projects as long as they are continuing. Research is very important. We see firsthand what's happening in the Arctic in relation to climate change, the environmental impacts. We do anything from fish quality work, tagging char, to collecting clams, looking for contamination, to water quality. I think all this stuff is there needs to be more Indigenous roles in these types of fields, because for all these years, there's been a lot of people flying up here doing research in relation to climate change. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, why can't we do it, right? We're the ones that are living here. We're the ones that are seeing the impacts. Why don't we start securing research contracts and giving economic benefits to youth in Nunavut and teaching them our skills, teaching them the different kind of traditional skills, scientific skills, with all the technology that we have out there to measure sea ice. This is going to be your number one tool right here, just a piece of rod that's going to tell you whether it's safe enough to walk on that piece of ice or not. Because the sea ice conditions are changing. It's not safe as enough, and it's not as safe as it used to be. We're seeing changes a lot happen. So that's why I tie together my youth programs in relation to science as well. So that's what I believe in.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your perspectives for the first question. So this brings us to our next question, which is, climate action can take many forms. Why do you think art has become such an important medium? Does someone want to start us off?
Yeah, there's this film that I always try to bring up. I think, also I just want to say I've learned so much from the other panelists so far, so thank you for your words. But there's this film called Angry Inuk by Alethea, if I'm saying their name right. I love that film. I watched it for the first time last semester in the fall. And I know for me, I go to school like over 3,000 miles away from home, and I do plan on going back home after attaining my degree. But watching that film was honestly very healing. But they were able to use film as a medium of activism and talk about the way of living for the Inuit. And I remember this one scene where a hunter was describing, obviously like hunting for seal is a really integral part of our culture. Like I'm Yupik, but we're also Inuit. But hunting for seal is a really, it's like a coming of age thing for a lot of our young men and our boys back home. And I know for me, when the hunter was describing that we care about those living animals. They were scared because they thought that, barging or the noises coming off from that can hurt the seals, like hearing that, like even when we hunt and when we subsist from the land, we regard the very animals we eat as equal to our brothers and sisters. And this is something that's hard for a lot of non-native people to understand, but the land that we live on and the animals that we subsist on, we regard them as if they are our brothers, as if they are those in our community. Why? Because they give us, what we need to survive. They're sacred beings. And Alethea did such an amazing job documenting that and use that medium of art to kind of tell their own story. And I know for me, there are a lot of, especially like, I feel like a lot of Native youth are pushed into STEM, but like, especially now, the way that especially our Native youth in our communities use music and use art or use film or use animation to kind of navigate historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, their own personal stories, is a really beautiful thing. But especially with like climate activism, that one particular film really resonated with me. And then even seeing some of my younger nephews and nieces, like my nephew caught a walrus like for the first time, and he's like 10, 11 years old. Like it's like phenomenal to see how we're going back to our traditions in the year 2022. But even how they use modern forms of art to describe how we feel is really amazing, but it's also like really healing. Yeah.
Thank you. Second Iwa?
Yeah, thank you. So for me as an artist, art is an amazing way of expressing climate change because art is so universal. It's a language that everyone can understand. So art can do anything that you want it to, and anyone will understand it. When it comes to climate change, like talking about climate change, it can become very academic and not everyone understands that. So when you make art, it can be films, it can be any visual art, it can be music. You know, you can kind of overdo it because overdoing also kind of makes people understand even more. And just like Chierpati said, Angry Inuk is an amazing example of showing Indigenous problems in a way that people can understand. Yeah, so art can just do some absolutely amazing things. And also, like, for example, my art, I portray Indigenous rights and the problems that we go through. And people are very easy to be like, so I think it means this, or I think it means this. And they kind of understand, if that makes sense. Yeah. That's all.
Thank you. Our next question is, what's the question you're most tired of hearing on this subject, and what would you like to say about it so you never have to answer it again?
I can go. I can start.
Go for it.
Yeah, so something that I hate hearing after all the presentations I do, after every conversation I have, right? Like a lot of these talks that I have, as a scientist personally, happen in the academic sphere, in the academic realm. And one question I always get after I, share all the atrocities that are happening against Indigenous people, like culture, food insecurity, climate injustice, Indigenous people not having, a voice at the table when we should. Something they always ask is, okay, but what's happening that's positive? Like, how do you stay motivated every day? Like, okay, what does the future look like? Does the future look bright? Like, well, I don't know. You tell me. Like, you're the one who's high up in this position, has all this power, right? Like, you can invite me to these things and give all these talks, but I'm not here to make everybody feel good. I'm here to be honest. I'm here to speak for my ancestors and my elders who couldn't fill this space because they don't have a Western education. Like, it's so exhausting because I'm like, I mean, yeah, there are some positives. Like, I go home to Beaver. My family, continues to hunt, fish, and trap, but that's my family. And if there's no land for us to hunt, fish, and trap on, then that's gonna die. Like, it's just, the blunt reality of it sometimes. And I know it takes a lot, of people together. And I don't know, one question I get all the time is, man, that's pretty dark. Is there anything positive? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And I'm like, well, I mean, my grandparents have been doing this work, since the early 1900s. So, I mean, it doesn't look like it, but I mean, I hope so, and I think the thing that gives me hope, I'll answer it now, are people like Charitie and Sikiningwak and, Alex, and people who are keeping our culture alive. And, what everybody said, is so true. Like, we have Indigenous people on the ground who are willing to do the work. We have, young Indigenous people going and getting a Western education and putting themselves through that, that uncomfortable place. And we have artists who are communicating in a language that everybody can understand, and just putting so much time and effort and energy into these pieces of art, right? Whether it's film or whether it's, music or storytelling. Like, so much of us as Indigenous people is in the arts, is submerged in the arts. So it's just a way for us to express ourselves, and it's a way for us to communicate to people who don't understand that. So yeah, I mean, I have hope in everybody who's here and everybody who's doing the work, but there's a reason why most people, in this line of work are under the age 30 or 35, because you get so burnt out, and you Alex and you sit, like, yeah, it's just exhausting saying the same thing and it falling on dead ears, and it's really emotionally taxing. So yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not going to be me.
Anyone else want to join in from our panelists?
Yeah, I just want to make sure if Alex or anyone else wants to talk, to give them space. There are two things that I think about when asked that question, or like some things, or two narratives that are really put out about Native people. One narrative is that we're in need of help, that we're struggling. Brianna Freund is this really amazing Samoan activist that I look up to. Someone I'm thankful to be in community with, who described, who asked us, we are drowning, not fighting. There are a lot of non-Native people who look to our communities and see coastal erosion and see us having to, be relocated from lands that we've lived on for thousands of years, and think that we're a struggling people. Or the second narrative being that the work we're doing now is something that we just started. But this work stems back for generations. It's something that our own grandfathers, our own grandmothers were doing. And, we're not a struggling people. This is something that we're actively fighting. We're thriving. We're still able to laugh. I think some of the most healing and best experiences of my life were around the dinner table, with my entire family, roasting each other, love language, making fun of each other, maintaining good relation with one another as we eat salmon and tea and, like, pile of bread. I feel like it's like a very Alaskan thing. But despite everything that we face, I need people, like, I really want people to understand that, like, to not view us as, this white savior complex where we need help. You just need to listen to us. Because despite all of that, we're still able to laugh. We're still able to make jokes. We're still able to accomplish what we do. We're still able to make art and make films and make media. And we're still able to create a world where our children can reimagine what their life would look like if colonialism didn't happen. And I think that's really healing. But I think people need to understand that we're still able to do these things despite what's happening in our communities.
Thank you. Sakiniwa, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. I think, like, kind of trying to answer that question. It's kind of the same as we heard before from Darcy. It's this, like, why do you have to be so negative all the time? And I mean, it's a really annoying question because again, like, we don't really have anything I mean, of course, there are so many positive things to say always, but you know, we can't move on if we don't do anything about our struggles, if we don't get like, if we don't help each other out in our struggles. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like the question that annoys me the most.
Thank you. And Alex, which question bothers you the most?
Yeah, what was that?
Or which question bothers you the most?
None of them bother me, I guess. They all want to learn, so we gotta.
Do you need to repeat the question, the first question So I asked at the beginning, what's the question you are most tired of hearing on this subject? And what would you like to say about it so you never have to answer it again?
I don't know. That's a hard question. Like for me, teaching kids all the time, I never want anybody to be afraid of asking questions, right? So I think questions are very important for anyone, and it's very important for us to answer those types of questions. So I don't know how we could answer that.
But I get you. As an educator, it's different, I think. Yeah, this is, I think, referring to like outside the community context, for people that don't understand either your work or why you're teaching what you're teaching. But that's a very important perspective as well. I agree. Like when my students ask questions, I always tell them, go ahead, right? So
Yeah.
thank you. One question that we have is, how do you counteract or respond to the naysayers who say that what you propose can't be done? And I know there's a lot of naysayers. Trust me, just even being at Harvard, it's like, dang. Like, so I could go through the list. Charitie?
Yeah, also if you hear like background noise, it's because there's construction happening on campus, so I apologize for that in advance. Honestly, because I also do research, my research here has been really supported by, which is really surprising, by a lot of the professors here at Columbia. I have a really amazing mentor. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm not going to name any names, but in my experience, when I have meetings with people who are, I guess, like well known in the science community, because again, I'm only like 20, so I still have so much to learn, but I also know that what I know and what I have learned from those back in my community is just as valid as some of these professionals, but just hearing people talk about my community and doing research in my community as solely extractive, like, I don't even know the right words, but something that they could take from. And I know when I initially started talking, I talked about how people come into our communities to get a PhD, to get a published paper. And there are elders back home who don't even know what that is, and I've gotten a lot of support from professors here, but I've also heard some pretty dehumanizing things in the same academic space where I'm supported. And that's not okay, which is why when I talk to my younger siblings or talk to my nieces and nephews back home, I'm not going to push them to higher academia because again, it's like very violent. So like these naysayers can be the very same people that you share space with. And I don't think that should be the reality for Native people who enter spaces like this, but more times than not it is. Yeah, and so when I respond to that, I think one thing that I've learned even from my own mom and my grandma is that, you know, you can't be confrontational about it, because then you'll be like, oh, like she's, like, like don't listen to her anymore. Like she's not experienced. She's only like an undergrad. She's only like, she's still a kid. And I've just learned to like take the higher road, which is what I feel like a lot of Native people have to do. We can't be angry. We can't be upset. But have I been those things? Yes. Almost like every other day here. I think a lot of, especially like I bet like Native people even at Harvard understand that like, there are times and experiences where we feel invalid because of the knowledge that we know, knowledge that I refuse to change my mind about, things that I've learned from my grandparents, from those in my community. So just taking the higher road, I really, I wish that we, because at the same time, I also want to say that we have to like yell, like be upset, be angry in these professional spaces, because I feel like we have the right to do that. But yeah, I don't know if that's a good response, but like I think that's like how I've learned to navigate the space, because I've also gotten a lot of support, but also even the support of my peers, and finding community here, finding community with other Native people here, finding community with other UBIC people here. Like I recently met another UBIC student from Amherst, and we like hung out. It was like our first time meeting, because we were just like mutuals online, but like we were like hanging out, like laughing, talking about like what it's like back home. She's from Tuxuk Bay, and we were talking about like even some of the drama in our own communities, and that was really fun. But like some pieces of advice I would give to people is to find people, to find community, because there are people who will listen to you, who will validate you, who will see you, and who will understand that your identity as a Native person is important. They'll see you for that. And yeah, just to find good people, because there are those who will support you. Yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you. Darcy?
Yeah, that's a good question and a really good response, Charity. So yeah, I mean, can definitely relate, with like being in a safe space, right? Like with your family around the dinner table, eating pilot bread and eating fish and salmon and moose and, our traditional foods, that in and of itself is healing. So I think when we occupy these spaces and, people say, they're naysayers, it's pretty easy to identify pretty early on who they are. I think that, I wish I could say that'll change when you graduate and find a job. But I think as Indigenous people, it's kind of an uphill battle, because we're still occupying a space where we're not supposed to be, at least in the research realm. I think a lot of it depends on who the naysayer is. If it's an ally who is just uneducated, then I don't take it personally, and I'm like, hey, don't say that, or like there's different ways, there's like teaching opportunities, but then also in these spaces, it's like, it's exhausting to, take the higher road. And, we can be angry and we can get frustrated. And, when that happens, I have the best boss in the world. I email her and I'm like, hey, I'm taking a mental health day. Like I went to this conference, it was exhausting. Like I was the minority in every realm. Like no one listened to me. They didn't value me as a person. Like they see me and they don't see a scientist. They just see this young Indigenous woman who's, radical. And it's exhausting. So when you come across those naysayers in the academic realm and the research realm and the art realm and, in the education realm, it's, I think, I hate to say we're used to it, because we shouldn't have to be used to it. But, when people say that can't be done, or, this or that, or like just push back against you, that's when I go home and I, have a family dinner. And, that's a safe space for all of us, because we do use humor as an outlet. We like joke about things and, laugh about it. And I tell them about this conference I went to and they're like, holy, that was nuts. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's really grounding, family and community, and how much we can relate with one another, as Indigenous people and people of color. It's a lot's been done in this country against people of color. And I think finding other, allies and friends, people who have gone through it and experienced it, we have a underlying understanding of each other, and, we're there to support each other and lift each other up. And it's exhausting. But yeah, staying grounded is, of the utmost importance. And Charitie, I agree with you, everything you said completely. So not sure if that answers the question either, but I just want to
thank you.
echo everything Charitie said.
Thank you. Second, Enguage.
Yeah, it's a great question, but so what my mother taught me when I was a kid was play their game. And for me, depending on what ethnicity you're talking about, it can mean different things. But how I understand it is that when there are naysayers, for example, you need to understand where they come from and why they are why they're like, no, you can't do that. You need to understand why are they saying that, and how do you approach them to make them understand. They don't need to agree in the end, but at least try to make them understand where you come from by trying to understand where they come from. I guess that's
very wise, I'd say. Very beautifully said. Reminds me of building bridges, and how we are able to make those connections between communities. So thank you. Alex, would you like to share some thoughts?
Not really.
It's all right.
I didn't.
You're like, I don't pay attention to the naysayers.
I didn't think this was going to take an hour, and I got kids that come every weekend throughout the year, Friday, Saturday, so I got to get ready for them for tomorrow. So
Okay,
I'm going to have to leave this thing, and thank you very much for keeping me a part of this, and best of luck to everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So now I want to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask our panelists. If not, I got more questions, don't worry. We got one question.
Hi, my name is Isaac. I'm the one that your mic's not on. It is. Oh, now it's on. Hello. Hi. I'm Isaac, and I just had a question about where you saw the intersection of science and art. I feel like sometimes they're talked about in distinct conversations, but I think there's a lot of overlap, and I just would love to hear your perspectives on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I could start off. I brought up that film. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it, Enguage. I think for me, that's where I saw some of the first mediums of art where I saw an intersection of art and science, but also a film that validated Indigenous knowledge systems, kind of like what we grew up knowing. And I know Alethea created that film for a lot of Native people to understand how urgent the issue was. So it's about seal skin and how Native people, I don't want to call it a commodity, but use that as a business to survive, because it's really expensive when you live up in the north. Grocery stores, having access to resources. and how it's valid to, sell these items, but how, we had white people, for lack of better word, illegalize that practice and tradition, which is not okay. And Alethea created that film so that more people were aware of that. And I think that was one example where I saw the intersection of science and art. I love a lot of movies and like film. I talk a lot about it. Like, even though I am studying engineering, I think one thing that me and my siblings talk about a lot are Taika Waititi's films. I'm also a Pacific Islander. So seeing not even just him, but how specifically this one film called Boy, how we use mediums of art and film and, making signs or paintings to kind of describe healing, but also it shows a lot of our Native youth, because I feel like a lot of us think about, what my life would look like if colonialism didn't happen, if our kids didn't have to worry about what they would eat, for their next meal, if poverty wasn't the reality of so many people back at home. And I know that films like Taika's, but also even Molly of Denali, I love that show. Like, they talk about the residential boarding school era, but they're able to, create a world for our youth to think about who they could be. If they could like live in the stars, they could be like, I know my brother, he wants to be like a ninja. I always talk about like my family because it's like central to the work I do. But even those films that talk about family dynamics and reimagining what life would look like outside of the construct of colonialism are at the intersections of science, climate change, and like what we know. Why? Because it's healing, but also because the desecration of land, what's happening to our land is rooted in our own journey of healing trauma. So I think like one thing that I've learned from some pretty amazing Native professors, even here at Columbia, is that what we're seeing is happening to our land is rooted in how Native women are being treated. It's rooted in how Native youth are navigating these violent systems that put us in this place to begin with. And to reconcile historical trauma is to like help the land. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but like I remember learning that parallel and like everything made sense. I realized that like everything was connected. But yeah, like movies like Boy, Angry, honestly any Taika Waititi film, but also like Avatar: The Last Airbender, like those type of shows help our youth reimagine our lives outside of colonialism. And all of that is rooted even at the intersections of like science, climate change, because yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. That's kind of like a rant, but I think it's a really great question.
That was great. Thank you. Darcy?
Yeah. Great response again, Charity. Yeah, we're on the same page. Really good question. I think, yeah, just about any film done by an Indigenous director, author, writer, artist is science, because we're just amplifying Indigenous knowledge and we're amplifying the voices of people whose voices haven't been amplified. And what we know is science. It's science. If it was in the format of Western science, it'd be the richest data set in the world, and people, would utilize it. And I think, like I said earlier, that so much of who we are as Indigenous people is centered around the arts, right? Our traditions, our dances, our songs, our stories, everything is art, but it's also science. So we just express our science through art. And I think that, Taika Waititi's films are a great example. Indian Horse is a film that amplifies the history of Canada. That's science, because it's a historical film about boarding schools and what happened. And that's a really, really, really hard film for me to watch, because it's so accurate. And that's what my grandma went through. Like, this is barely even history. It's and my grandma's alive. I call her every couple days. Like, it's insane looking at the stories that are being told through arts and visualizations and, you know, stories, documentaries, conferences. You know, every time you talk to an Indigenous person, it's science. Their worldview and their life experiences are science, because it's been passed down generation to generation to generation. So I can argue that every art form by an Indigenous person is science. So that's something I guess I'll end with. Great question.
Thank you. I really liked, let me turn this on real quick. Thank you. I really liked how you said that we express our science through art. I think we need to get that on a t-shirt, just throwing it out there. Because I think that's very true. And my background is actually in neuroscience, and it is a very violent space for Indigenous people, because our science is called alternative, but is it really? I think is the original, but you know, that's another conversation. Any last thoughts, Second Enguage? In regards to the question, sorry, not like the whole talk. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't get to hear what you said.
Oh, if you wanted to chime in on the question.
Oh yeah. So I don't have much to say because you guys answered it so amazingly. All I can say is that I agree. I agree that science is art. And you know, art is just you know, everything in the world just amplified. Yeah, I can only say that I agree.
Thank you. Does the audience have any questions they would like to ask? You can also, for the folks on the webinar, put it in the chat and we'll see them. I guess let's flip it. Do the panelists have any questions for the audience? Hold me on that. We have a question.
Is this the one that's not working? Okay. Okay. Hi. Thanks.
Maybe it's that one.
Hello. Okay. Thanks so much for, if I stand here. Oh, okay. For joining us today and sharing your knowledge, your stories, and perspectives. I really appreciate it. So we have a mix of academics in the room from all parts of Harvard, lots of different colleges and graduate schools here. And I think people are interested in engaging in Indigenous perspectives in a respectful and responsible way. What are some, you don't have to have like the perfect rubric or anything, of course, but what are some things that come to mind?
Go ahead, Darcy.
Great question. So I prepared a talk about 15 minutes long that I'm completely happy not sharing. But I have a guiding principles document for researchers wanting to work in the North. It's about 11 guiding principles with an ultimate guiding principle to start all of it off. And that's that respect is at the heart of everything. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share this guiding principles document. It's basically just meant to hold the hand of researchers who want to work in the North. I made it internally for Woodwell Climate Research Center where I work. But I got, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have put it together without, you know, all of my elders, youth colleagues who, you know, put their perspective and their spin into it as well. It's more of a resources document. There's a bunch of other guiding principles from Alaska to New Zealand. I really tried to do a pretty good job. It took me about a year to make. So there's 11 guiding principles. There's a decolonization aspect to it. It's mainly focused for Alaska just because that's my area of expertise. but yeah, I mean, I, have done some work with Harvard Kennedy School in the past, and I think they're working on, going over it and stuff as well. So, I mean, I'm happy to share it to whoever would like it. It's not published because I don't think it should have to be published in order to be validated. It's validated by my elders, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, I'm happy to send that guiding principles document along. But yeah, that's, one resource in addition to a plethora of resources that I'm sure Charlie and Enguage or Charitie can offer.
Yeah, I'm really proud of you. That's a great resource. I feel like a lot.
Yeah,
of
we
people
can share it with everyone in the room as well. So we'd be more than glad to have a copy so we can share. Thank you.
I know Harvard has a really amazing undergraduate Native community. And I think for, I guess, professors who are in the audience or mentors, etc., I think when you're doing the work, it would be really helpful if you engaged, especially with our Native undergraduate students at the university. Because I know for me, with the work I've done, I have a really amazing mentor. I also study anthropology here, and she has been such an amazing resource in terms of like helping me meet other people, but also supporting me in my research. So just reaching out to Native undergrad students and allowing them to work under you, but also listening to them, because I feel like you learn a lot from our Native youth. And hiring Native people, there's especially issues at institutions like this where, they explicitly say that there's a position for like an Indigenous person, but making sure that that resource is shared has been difficult. So making sure you do get to hire Native people for postdoc positions, etc., and helping Native undergrad students gain experience, but also listening to us. I think those are some of the things that I first think of when I think about how you can engage with Indigenous youth, especially because I feel like children in general, especially like Native children, are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. I know for me, I've learned so much from Native kids back at home. But yeah, just knowing when to listen, when to step back, when to be quiet, especially when it comes to our community, is really important, and something I would share with those in the audience.
Thank you. Now, I guess, yeah, any last comments for our last questions, Enguage?
I didn't quite understand the question.
Oh, so it was one of someone from our audience that asked a question about how we have a mixture of academics and non-academics in the room, and then what is it that you would share? How can they engage with Indigenous perspectives responsibly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, there are so many amazing Indigenous people who do amazing work. And I mean, for me, it's just, try to listen to them, give them space, and, instead of like, don't be like that white savior kind of person, and just give them space to like let them speak for themselves instead of speaking about them, if that makes any sense. Yeah,
No, I think that's a great note to end.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I guess that's it.
Yeah, it's like to wrap our session up. And with that, I will say thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hand it over now to Vic, who is one of our conference leaders. But I really enjoyed talking to each one of you, and if there's any way I can help, I'm definitely available. Thank you.
All right, let's just keep applauding. So, I want to say also just a personal thank you so much to all of you for joining. I mean, I know Charity, you're literally tuning in the middle of a school day. And I know that all of you have so many things that you're doing. I know that Alex obviously is also right in the middle of doing a bunch of important work back in his home as well. So just want to say that I really appreciate your time and your expertise that you've offered today. Also, I know that talking about all the things that are messed up and that you're confronting all the time is emotionally draining. So thank you for the emotional labor as well as the intellectual wisdom that you brought today. So yeah, thank you so much. All of you theoretically received a link for a debrief after this. It should be in your emails. So if you guys could jump on that, by all of you, I mean the panelists specifically. Panelists, if you could hop on that Zoom link and we'll just wrap up with you. And then for attendees virtually as well as folks in person, we're going to be starting our next panel on governance at 2:30. So feel free to grab some more food, grab some coffee, do whatever you need to do. Virtual attendees, take a 15-minute break and we'll see you back on this Zoom link or back in this room at 2:30. Thank you.